Hey Teacher Geeks, it's Travis here. Classroom Jeopardy is a really fun and engaging classroom activity. I've played it for years, I'm sure you have too, but in this video I want to explain a couple of tweaks that I've made that make it so much more effective. I'm also going to share and explain how I make my Jeopardies using my favorite tool. And then thirdly, I'm just going to finish off by, I can't help ranting about education and a few philosophies and where Classroom Jeopardy fits into my kind of broader thinking about education. So I used to run Jeopardy by standing at the front of the class, hosting the game, being the sage on the stage, the center of attention, and I'd have students maybe in small groups or individually, and they would call out the categories and I would operate the machine. But I found doing it that way, there was too much downtime. There wasn't enough repetition. There wasn't enough engagement. If I had, a class of 15, 20 or 30 students, only one student can really talk and engage at one time. And there was just a lot of downtime and it was too passive. So I made a simple switch. I just started to get students in groups of 3. And so I would create the Jeopardy. I'd have the link and I'd email students and then I put them into groups of 3. Now suddenly there's so much more engagement. Every student in the class knows that their turn is coming very shortly, and there's just so much more engagement. And now I just roam around the classroom and watch the students play Jeopardy on their laptops. So with this Jeopardy tool that I'm going to explain in a moment, you can email out the link so students have it. This is also great because it's a more fun way to revise if students want to go over any of the content later on, say before a test or an assessment. And so I tell the students, hey look, you guys can keep score, you can be competitive, and I know some students really are, or I say, just play for fun, right? You can keep score or you don't have to, but just try to get through it. And I'll always use my kitchen timer. I find 10 to 12 minutes is about a good enough time. Some students will get done ahead of that. Some students might not just get finished, but 10 to 12 minutes is perfect for this consolidation recap activity at the start of the lesson. And at that time, I just walk around and usually students will ask questions or they might point out one of the mistakes I often make in my Jeopardies. And that's it. I love it because 100% engagement. I can step back and just let the students go for it. And that really for me is when the teaching is the most effective, right? I guess it's that guide on the side as opposed to sage on the stage. Now, of course, the downside to this is that it takes about 30 minutes per Jeopardy lab to create. But again, I think that's worth it for just this activity to have the students fully immersed in this at the start of class. This is one of the few times where I will ability group students. So I choose the groups ahead of time and I sort them out by, roughly ability and also the students that they might not usually work with. And I'll tell them ahead of time at the start of class, right, here are your groups, get into these groups of 3. I like to do that just for my own students. I've found in our context here that they can be a little bit self-conscious about their abilities, or if you've got a student who's lacking in confidence and they're, with the student who just knows all the questions, it seems to me like they feel a bit daunted or overwhelmed sometimes. Maybe I'm being too soft, but that's just what I like to do. One of the few times in which I will ability group students for this. Now let's have a look at my favorite online Jeopardy tool. This is Jeopardy Labs, and I'm going to put a link in the description to one that's already been created. I've never used the browse feature because I always build my own Jeopardy Labs tailor-made to the units that I'm creating. But if you just want to trial this out or you just want to save this for a rainy day when you don't have that much time, or you're a bit hungover or you're a bit pushed for time and you need something in a rush, this Disney one could probably work for any grade level, any class, right? Now what's cool about this, I only just realized you can see that you can add pictures. And I never knew this was a feature. This apparently is a feature of the premium one. You pay 20 bucks, you get that lifetime membership. I've never paid it, but I'm going to do that today before I make my next Jeopardies for my latest unit, because I think that feature of having the pictures in there is really cool. And so you see, you just go in there, create your the title and the password. I recommend keeping a document, like a Word doc or a Google Doc, a nice file where you keep all your Jeopardy Labs, their names and the passwords and the hyperlinks. I do this all the time just so I know where to find them in case I need to go back and change or edit them. You just go in there and if you see you've got 5 categories and you can add your questions. Traditionally, Jeopardy is played by having the answer come up and then the students have to say the question, right? I don't do it that way. I just put the question comes up and then students write the answer. I've just found that's faster for me to write and it's just easier to play the game that way. Jeopardy works really well, I find, towards the end of a unit because you can see you've got 5 categories there. So it's quite a lot of content to cover. So I really want to make sure there's a good body of knowledge that we've covered so far in the unit before we get to this game. The fourth and fifth category, so I definitely want to make sure I've covered 3 topics with enough there for those first 3. The fourth one could be like general for my course. So my psychology class, for example, it could just be general psych or things that they should know by now, like maybe the definition of psychology. And the fifth one could just be general knowledge. Just for fun, always the fifth general knowledge 500-point question. It's always something about me, like my son's name, my daughter's name. It could be now my wife just went into hospital today. She's in the hospital right now, hopefully giving birth to my 3rd son. I'm not allowed to be there because of COVID. 3rd son, 3rd child, 2nd son. So that might be the next question I put in there. So what a peculiar birth announcement. Anyway, don't think I'm a bad husband. I'm sitting at home making Teacher Geek videos while my wife is at hospital, but I literally can't be in there because of COVID. So I'm stuck at home, like doing this. This is how I'm trying to keep my mind occupied. So I'll typically in my unit plans put Jeopardy in there twice because it's so fun and there's a lot of work that goes into it. So I'll put it at about 2/3 of the way through the unit plan. And then I have it maybe at the last lesson or at the very end of the unit as a review. And then by that stage, all the content's been covered. But I only ever have 1 Jeopardy per unit. It's like any activity, you do it too much, students get sick of it, but once every few weeks, it's perfect. Well, once a unit, it's great. In terms of asking the questions, I find that even the 500 category, the highest value, it's best if they are factual questions, answerable with like 1 word or 1 phrase. Like they're definitely, you got that right or wrong. I found the tendency, or my tendency was to create more conceptual, more abstract, concept-based questions as the points went up, but that just led to arguments, and you want that dopamine rush, and this is why Kahoot is so popular. You get that dopamine rush when you get it right, when you go, boom, yes, I got the answer. If the answer comes up and it's like, I kind of got it, I guess, it's not that same feeling of excitement when you're playing this game, right? So it definitely needs to be a definitive yes or no answer. So the way you make them more difficult is they're just more obscure, so more obscure information that might have been mentioned once or hasn't been mentioned that much or whatever. But I would still recommend sticking to very factual-based questions. We can see, if you see my previous videos on the 3 levels of learning, these are the level 1 knowledge, right? What is, but knowing what things are, the building blocks, right, of information that we're getting across in our unit plans. And that's Jeopardy. Again, everyone knows about it, but I wish I had have known about it when I first started teaching. So if you're a new teacher, hopefully this might be new for you, but it's those tweaks that I made that made the world of difference. And I made this video because I just shared that activity with a colleague the other day. He came back and said, oh, hey, I tried that thing with groups of 3, worked really well, thanks. So, hey, works for him. He's an experienced, great teacher, maybe working for you. Again, so I should just mention that I know that a lot of what I'm saying in these videos, you guys already know, but maybe you don't, right? And I didn't always know it. So anyway, I hope it's helpful. So this Jeopardy, it's fun and engaging. Students like to play it. It never seems like a chore when I play it for my students, but then again, I have a luxury of having great students that are always so compliant and lovely that you tell them to go build a brick wall for 5 days on end, they'd say that was the most fun thing I ever did. So I know I'm blessed, but I think this would work in any class with any group of students, provided the questions are directed at the right level. That's the tricky thing though, what questions to ask. Here we see the advantage of having your content known ahead of time, right? This is the unit, these are the content, these are the building blocks I want to cover by the end. That makes it so much easier to create these activities. I kind of have that luxury where I write all my ebooks for every unit ahead of time, and these take a long time to write. I just finished writing one on stress for IB health psychology, and that was about 6 or 8 months in the process. So once I have that content now, I can use those building blocks to create all these fun games. I know it's a little bit frustrating now if you're not at that point, or if you're not an IB psychology teacher, you can't just go and hit download and get the stuff I've already created, but that's part of the vision, that's part of the plan. Bear with me, more on that later. Or hopefully by the time you're watching this, the vision has come to fruition and there'll be a whole bunch of links in the description for you to check it out. But that'll be at around about, it'll be a couple of years in the making yet. Another reason Jeopardy works is because I'm controlling the content. So I know I rant a lot about the individualized model of education and its downfalls, and I talk a lot about student choice and that problem as well, but I want to clarify where I stand on student choice and giving students the choice in classrooms. So I'll tell you about the worst mistake I made as a teacher was when I first arrived in Japan. Not the worst mistake, but one of. I had 5 classes. None of them had really a curriculum that I could follow. They didn't have unit plans or lesson plans or resource. I mean, they had the resources, but it just wasn't in a way that I could just pick it up and go with it. And it baffled me for being in a school for 150 years. Our school was 150 years old. How do they not have a curriculum? And one of the classes was world history. I had 6 grade 12 students doing a world history class, and I said, okay, great, where are the unit plans? We don't have them. Where's the curriculum outline? We don't have it. Just teach what you want to teach. Right, so I made the terrible mistake of going to class and saying, hey, what would you guys like to learn about history? And I got a bunch of blank stares because students don't know what they don't know. And that's what teachers are for, right? We know all the cool and relevant and meaningful stuff that I want to teach them. But anyway, there weren't really that many ideas, so I threw out a bunch of ideas. Just stuff that I know as a history teacher that might be interesting. And one of those things was the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia, because I'd just come back from Cambodia. And so, is it Cambodia or Laos? Laos. No, it's Cambodia. Yeah, anyway, many years ago since I taught that. And so I threw that out, that idea. And they said, yeah, okay, Pol Pot, Cambodia, okay, sounds kind of interesting. I didn't have any materials. I didn't have any resources. And so now, added to my stress of coming to a new country and also teaching volleyball for the first time and coaching basketball, and then these other 4 classes I had to teach, plus adapting to a new school, I had to build a unit plan on the history of the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia from scratch. Now, I had just come from teaching IB history in a different school. I should have just adapted those materials for this. I think it would have been more interesting, I think, because I know the materials, but most importantly, I would have saved my own sanity, right? I would have saved my own stress levels. And I think we just have to pick and choose when we give students the choice. And I'll tell you here, I'm in a great position now that I can give students the choice next time I go into teaching an IB psychology class. I've just finished a unit on health psychology about stress. Because of the way the course works, I can now go in and give them the choice. And I say, look, I've got a unit here called Love and Marriage for the psychology of human relationships. Would you be interested in learning about this? It's all about why do we fall in love? Why do we get divorced? How do we stay in love? You know, that kind of thing, right? Love and marriage. Or if you'd like to learn about stress, what causes it? What are the explanations for stress? What other health problems might it cause? And most importantly, well, how do we cope with stress? What are the best coping mechanisms? And how can we be more resilient? So I can go in there with these 2 units and I've got everything I need. I've got the ebooks, I've got the books, right? I've got the workbooks, I've got the unit plans, the activities, everything's there ready to go. And I can say, what would you guys like to do? That's where I can give student choice. And I think that's more valuable for everyone. They get to choose 2 meaningful units. I know that I've got all the materials, so it doesn't add to my workload, but it's taken many years to build up this bank of unit plans. And also, because I have all the materials, if, let's say, out of a class of 15, probably I would say 9 or 10 would be my guess. We'll go for the stress, and a few would go for love and marriage. I can say, right, we're going to do stress, but if you really want to learn about that love and marriage stuff, about why we fall in love, here's the book. Go for it. You can read it in your own time. Even, hey, perhaps come the exams, you could study that for the exams. I don't mind. But this is what we're going to do as a class. Then I would say, okay, well, why don't we just split the class and you guys do this, you guys do this, because then you miss out on, well, not only is that adding to my workload, but also you miss out on that shared experience of doing this thing together. And I think that is more valuable. Having said that, I'm open to the idea maybe one day experimenting with having 2 groups of students do something different. For example, one of the next units I'm working on is depression. And so now I can give students a choice. While we're doing abnormal psychology, would you like to learn about depression or post-traumatic stress disorder? And if I got half and half, maybe I would try to do it half and half. I don't know if that's going to work or not. I'm not going to give any advice on it because I haven't tried it, but that's something for the future. But that's where I stand on student choice. It is great to do it as long as I have the resources and it's not adding to my stress, right? How did I get there from Jeopardy? Well, the idea here is taking control of your content. And when you take control of your content as a teacher, you can create these really fun and engaging activities. Jeopardy is just one of those. But it only works when we take back control, and it's not just about, okay, what do you guys want to do today? We direct this ship, right? Student focused, teacher directed. That's my motto. If you've got ways of improving Jeopardy, if you've got some tips, some ideas, then please let me know. I know there's lots of different versions of it out there. If you're a student and you do Jeopardy in the classes, maybe you're one of my students and you love it, you hate it, I'd love to hear your thoughts. All right, thanks, that's it. And coming up next time, I'm going to talk about why quitting my job last week feels like death.